The series takes place over, well, the story that we're telling takes place over about 15, 20 years in the course of a woman's life called Delia. And essentially it's about how this woman fell victim in one of her personal relationships to coercive behaviour, gaslighting, and domestic abuse and violence, and wasn't really believed by the police, and then was ultimately let down by the judicial system until they really needed her as a linchpin in a case against the guy. I can only tell you how I see the story and how I see this person, and the way I see it is this is a chap who started the relationship with someone with, I think, the best intentions. Something happened along the way where they went awry. Yeah, it's kind of difficult. It's a difficult one to sort of talk about from an external point of view, if that makes any sense. But I think in the story that we're telling, at least, there's a real movement within the relationship. But I do believe it started out with the best intentions in the story that we're telling. What research material was available? I don't really work in that way, to be honest with you. I think that's not to dismiss it, but it's just what works for me personally. I think the imagination is limitless, and I'm slightly more concerned with making the story that we're telling as believable as possible, rather than doing a sort of impression of somebody who may have existed. I think you have to invest in the day-to-day of what we're doing. And so a lot of it was just imagination, to be completely honest. No, it's not the first time I've played a part based on a real character. I've done it a couple of times before. Never with such graphic material, though. And largely the people that I've played have already passed away, and so this is the first time that it's still in recent memory, the events, and that brings with it a lot of responsibility and also obligation, I think, to be as fair as possible, and to give people the benefit of the doubt. That may sound a strange thing to say, but it's not for me to judge anyone. And so, you know, in terms of the whole moral questions of the story and whatnot, it's kind of, a lot of them are just kind of too big for me to deal with, you know, and ultimately my job is to come in and say the lines, make the scenes as believable as possible, and then beyond that I try and park everything else, leave everything at the door, and in a way sort of see it as a piece of fiction, whether rightly or wrongly, but I'm not here to judge anyone or to paint some moral lesson. It's not. I'm here simply to do my work. What was it like working with Anna? Oh, fantastic. I mean, that was definitely one of the draws of the job as well. I'd admired her for a long time. I think she's a fantastic actress. I saw her on stage about 10 or 15 years ago. She's brilliant. And so that's been one of the joys of this job, to be able to just lock into one another as actors and do our work. And the nature of the material can be quite dark and unpleasant. But that being said, I feel like we've spent an enormous amount of time rolling around laughing, just to try and keep the mood up and the mood light, you know. So it's been a really interesting, I've never done anything like this before, and it's been a really interesting experience. Lots of takeaways from it, you know. But Anna, fantastic. And the rest of the actors as well. The majority of my scenes are with Anna, but yeah, everyone's been magnificent. Yeah, nothing wrong with being unsympathetic. I think there's a tendency often to, when you're in meetings about jobs and story meetings and whatnot, people want every character to be as sympathetic as possible, and it's like, people aren't as sympathetic as possible. Oftentimes people are not. They wear the wounds of the life that they've had, and we shouldn't shy away from that. In terms of the question of why I think people will watch it, one of the draws perhaps could be, it's rare in a story like this that you focus on the victim. That was one of the big things for me in this job, that in no way are we sort of glorifying anyone, but actually we're focusing on someone who went through this ordeal and how she tried to build her life again. The violence at the beginning of the tale shouldn't be in any way fetishized, or that's not what the story's about. It's incidental in a way, but it's crucial to how she began to rebuild her life. For me, that's what's interesting about the tale, and I hope as well the audience will find it the same. Fantastic. Julia's the first time we'd met, in fact, but that's been a fantastic experience. She was herself an actress for a while, for a long time, and so she's got that shorthand with the actors. And I think, to be honest, I think it's a good idea. It's interesting that the person at the helm of a story like this is a female. That we're not telling, like, just for the reasons I gave about what I think is interesting about the tale. It's important that we have a female, I think, at the helm of that, telling that story and navigating her way through that. So it's been a really wonderful experience. And aside and apart from her brilliance as a director, she has a very warm and affable and nurturing atmosphere. And that's really great when you're doing scenes that can potentially be quite difficult or tense, or yeah, so it's been real fun. Yeah. Do I think this is an unusual program for ITV to make? Yeah, I think so, perhaps. I think so, perhaps. Like I said earlier, I think what's unusual about it and what drew me to it is the fact that you're focusing on the victim in this, and you're telling her story throughout. You're not glorifying or anybody else but the victim, and you're getting into the weeds of what that was like after the event. That's what I think is interesting, and that's kind of what's agony and painful about it as well. So I think that's unusual for any broadcasting. If you look at the sort of things that have been made recently in the same sort of genre, it's not. They're focusing very much on the perpetrator and not the victim, and I think that's where it's unusual. Yeah.